Falke is founder and chairman of Boulder Crest Foundation. He joins us for the entire half hour of our national broadcast today. You know, Ken, let me first welcome you to the broadcast.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us. You know, you spent 21 years in Navy, EOD, one of the most dangerous jobs in the military. You explained that. Tell us about what EOD is and what is it and what makes it so dangerous.
Well, EOD stands for Explosive Ordnance Disposal, and thank you for having me on the show today. You know, I think the short term is bomb disposal, and you know, any time you have to walk down on a bomb, it's pretty dangerous. And I think to keep it simple, and you know, a lot of military bombs that don't go off, we really understand them and we understand why they don't go off. But when you're talking about terrorist bombs or even worse, things that are planted in the ground like landmines and improvised explosive devices, it becomes very difficult to even find them to disarm them. So it's a super challenging job.
You know, you can never ask this question enough about that close proximity to death. It clearly teaches you about fear and clarity.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's like fear is inevitable, I think, when it comes to it. But this whole idea that, you know, decisive decision-making, great training, which the military is famous for, really can put you at ease. They actually did a study on bomb disposal personnel. When they were working on the devices, their heart rates actually went down, not up. And I think that's a real testament to the quality of training that the military provides.
Explain to us what your foundation does.
So early in the war, my wife and I got involved in helping wounded soldiers, primarily amputees that had been medevaced here to the DC hospitals, at the time Bethesda Naval Hospital and Walter Reed. We then started bringing the families of these severely wounded guys out to our home. And we live in Bluemont, Virginia, about an hour west here of the city. And one thing led to another, and we had a fairly large estate. We had 200 acres of land, and we took 37 acres of it, donated it, and built the nation's first privately funded retreat center for wounded soldiers.
You know, how did your experience, let's say, in combat, shape not only the way you think about leadership today, but the leadership that you're providing for these veterans?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think, you know, I think combat really forges you. It's kind of the fire, the adversity, you know, everything that's going on, and this forged individual comes out of it. But, you know, prior to even my combat experience, I had a lot of years in the Navy, and you just, you know, the leadership just gets better and better, the training, the people that you lead. And I come from a community, the EOD community, especially in the Navy, where, you know, the guys are all out, and you're working with, you know, what arguably is the professional team.
You know, it's fascinating. You know, I was once on the President's Commission of White House Fellows, where you select the leaders of the future. And the best candidates were always those with military service and background. Eric Greitens, who's the former governor of Missouri, Wes Moore, who's now the current governor of Maryland. What is it about that discipline, that sacrifice, that respect, that honor, knowing how to navigate any kind of situation, that the military continues to reinforce, sometimes better than a home, because many times parents want their sons sometimes to go off to the military because they want them to experience boot camp.
Yeah. It's yesterday I got to speak. I started my morning off speaking at St. John's Catholic High School in DC to juniors and seniors that are in the junior ROTC program, our future leaders. And I said the same thing to them, is that the military is really the last place on earth that trains humans in character. And that character is what builds great leaders. And you know, we get it wrong every now and then. We have our 10% like every other organization, but the 90% is 100% better than what most people get. And that's, I think, that character is what really drives and creates these great leaders like Eric and Governor Moore.
Was there ever a specific moment, let's say, when you realized your mission would continue after the uniform had come off? You realized that God had a greater purpose for you, and your wife, and this is why you founded the charity in 2004 to help those injured EOD personnel. What did you see that others weren't seeing at the time? And the fact that you were willing to use 30 plus acres of your land to build this facility, because you realized you didn't want the bureaucracy, you didn't want this process to be slowed. You realized they needed that help immediately, not just for them, but for future generations.
Yeah, well, you know, I got out of the Navy and started my own business, so I had this like entrepreneurial drive, which a lot of veterans have. Our company was very successful, which gave us the financial means to do what we did. But I think, you know, I could not sit back and watch the angst that was occurring in these families, you know, whether they were politically charged questions. You know, I'm looking at my son missing his legs. Am I ever going to be able to say this war was worth it? To just the terrible care that many of them were getting, especially on the mental health side. The physical injuries, what we started Boulder Crest for was to have these guys who were amputees come out to our property with their families and get away from the hospitals. But what we realized really quickly was that it wasn't the physical injuries holding people back, it was the invisible injuries. The mental health issues, the traumatic brain injuries, things that we couldn't see. And that's what we started to focus on at Boulder Crest about a year after we opened the place.
Well, listen, America and our veterans are definitely have a safe space that they know they can come to. I'm sure you cannot keep up with the capacity, but if we have more people duplicating what you're doing, what a difference it would make here in this country. We're going to take a break and come back more with our guests. I'm Armstrong Williams. Don't go away. You know, Ken, you've been so outspoken about the failures of modern mental health care for veterans. What's fundamentally wrong with the current system that we have?
You know, fundamentally, I think it's very clear that traditional mental health care is designed to do one thing and one thing only, and that's to make you feel less bad. And we believe strongly in the science of post-traumatic growth, which suggests that you should be able to do much better after a traumatic event in your life. So how do we make people feel less bad? We talk to them in therapy sessions, we give them drugs that calm their nervous system down, but we don't have them grasp that adverse situation and learn and grow from it, which most people do naturally anyway. But we put them into a system, we medicalize this model of care, and we don't make people better. We just make them feel less bad. And I think that's the fundamental problem with the traditional mental health care.
So why do you believe that so many programs focus too much on pathology instead of the possibility?
It's funny, one of the psychologists that I'm really close to said PTSD has become a garbage pail diagnosis. What was once, you know, studied after the Vietnam War for veterans, what was once very focused on people who had been involved in life-threatening injuries, had suffered these nightmares over and over and couldn't get them out of their heads, that diagnosis doesn't exist. You have any stress in your life today, you get diagnosed with PTSD. Mm-hmm. And that's when you medicalize and when you tell people they're broken, what are you going to do? They're going to believe it. And that's what's so frustrating about the system.
You know, it's always tragic when veterans or anyone in our society commits suicide. I'm just curious about how the rise in veteran suicide rates change your thinking about what actually helps people heal or make them feel their lives are worthless, they have nothing to live for. I don't want people pitying me. I go from someone who's a soldier, a strong person, and I become helpless.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's exactly what happens. I think there's a variety of reasons. There's no single reason anybody takes their own life. I've had several friends that have done it. I question myself, what could we have done more? How could we have stayed better connected? But at the end of the day, suicide is a disease of hopelessness. And when you look at the suicide prevention programs in our nation, the amount of money we've spent is on a parallel rise to the number of suicides that occur. So it's not even a money issue, which many associations will want you to believe. The belief is that what we're doing, as Einstein said, when you keep doing the same thing expecting different results, it's insanity. It's insanity that we keep doing the same thing. And over again, we hear from soldiers who go through traditional mental health care that the system doesn't work for them.
Why do we so quickly want to medicate so we don't have to do less? It doesn't require more of us. Instead of just address the situation where you are, where you heal and give these people the kind of responsibility and the overcoming for a lifetime. But we want to medicate. Everything is about medication now.
Everything. And it's like, I watch, I don't watch a lot of TV, but the TV I watch, I play Jeopardy with my wife every night. And the TV, every commercial is a pharmaceutical commercial that the side effects are worse than the benefits. Every single commercial. 3% of the people it worked for, 3 out of 15 it worked for. This nation loves medicine. And the mental health community has jumped on that bandwagon.
And the problem is we confuse symptom management with recovery.
That's right.
And they're not one and the same.
That's right. It's definitely not the same. It's not a road to recovery. It's the equation that I gave you earlier. It's that we make people in the traditional mental health care model feel less bad and not good.
So what is the road?
What's
the
road
blueprint
ahead?
to recovery, Ken?
We use a term, and Josh Goldberg, our CEO, and I co-authored a book called Struggle Well, Thriving in the Aftermath of Trauma. And when we met, so I'll give you just a quick story. I went around the nation and talked to some of the top psychiatrists and psychologists in this country that were doing innovative things in PTSD treatment. One couple, 2 psychiatrists in San Francisco, I was having dinner with one night, kept saying over and over again at the dinner table, what we're doing for soldiers doesn't work. I said, well, if it doesn't work, why in the hell are we doing it? And without even taking a breath, the lady at the table said to me, it's because the only thing the insurance companies will reimburse us for. And I was, at that point in time, it was like the lights on. I get it. Pharmaceutical companies, insurance companies, we understand why this has got to be broken. And I think really the roadmap ahead is that we've got to figure out a better system and not worry about the current system. I went to a global mental health conference in London, England about 7 or 8 years ago. The president of the American Psychological Association stood on the stage, said his #1 priority in his term of presidency was to get psychologists on the same reimbursement rates as medical doctors. Now, he didn't even know who was in the audience. There were people in the audience that had attempted suicide. And he wasn't talking about his #1 priority was helping American people get better. He was talking about his doctors getting more money. And I can't live with that. It just drives me crazy.
I'm just so thrilled that we're having this conversation because I'm sure, Ken, that what you've built has also helped you heal and give purpose and meaning to your life. And we got to give people, I always say to people, in life you need someone to love, something to do, and something to look forward to. And something to look forward to gives one purpose in their lives. We got to stop emphasizing where people are broken, where they fail, where they fall short, and we got to give them a purpose and meaning because you give them something to look forward to and the mindset to build towards that. We're going to take a break and come back. I'm Armstrong Williams. Don't go away.
It is easier to build up strong children than to try and repair broken men.
The streets are plagued with crime, violence. There's a lot of poverty, and it's all a result of lack of education that's happening in our schools. So it really is a crisis.
We come from very different political perspectives, but we've come to the same conclusion, and that is there is a crisis in the classroom. children are being deprived of quality of life because they're being deprived of a good education. We must solve this problem. It's incumbent upon all of us to join hands together to get this done.
We can't afford to wait one more day before we address these issues, because every day we lose another child.
Let's stop the politicking. Let's stop the games. Let's really do something to give these kids a real chance at life and being a part of that American dream.
We need accountability for funding. Many of the districts where you're seeing very low test scores, students graduating with very low literacy and math comprehension rates, they are receiving a lot of funding. So where is the money going where our kids aren't being adequately educated?
If you believe every child is deserving of a quality education, please go to educationjusticefoundation.com. And we're back with Ken Falke. You know, you base so much of your work, Ken, on the science of post-traumatic growth. In English, in layman terms, explain that to the everyday listener.
So I just told you the story really of this before the break, the story of my journey around the country. The last psychologist I met on this journey was a guy named Dr. Richard Tedeschi at the University of North Carolina. And Tedeschi and his colleague, Lawrence Calhoun, in 1995 coined this term post-traumatic growth. Now, post-traumatic growth in reality is as old as humanity. But the term, the scientific term, and the study of it came out in 1995. Again, what post-traumatic growth suggests is that after adversity, if you take the time during and after a traumatic event to understand it, you will grow from it. Calhoun and Tedeschi mostly studied families who had lost children to cancer. To see that these families, after the death of their child, went on to do some remarkable things they never would have done before. All of them would have given all of it up for their children to be back, but that wasn't a case. Now, I said to Tedeschi when I read the research, I said, what about the military? Have you ever done any work with them? And he goes, yeah, we did an interesting study on Vietnam-era prisoners of war, men who spent up to 8 years in prison camps in Vietnam. And I said, well, what'd you find out? And he said, well, Vietnam veterans, on average, which is about true for our current generation, about 30% of them came home with PTSD. And he said, how many POWs do you think came home? And I said, 100%. I'd been through SEER School, which is the Navy kind of POW training school. And I couldn't think of anything worse than being captured and tortured on the battlefield. And not like terrorists do today where they kill you the next day. These guys were in prison camps for 8 years. And when you meet them today, they're healthier, they're stronger, they're positive. You would never know they spent 8 years in a prison camp and were tortured and beaten and all the things that happened to them. And that resonated with me, and I knew it would resonate with the brothers and sisters of mine who I served with. And that's why I said to Tedeschi, do you think we can teach people, obviously it's a natural outcome, do you think we can teach people how to achieve post-traumatic growth in their lives sooner than it would naturally occur? He said, nobody's ever asked me that, but I'm here to help. And that's what we've been doing.
You know, post-traumatic trauma certainly differs from simply coping with trauma. You know, you said something interesting I was struck by. You know, we talk about the brokenness, we talk about having purpose, we talk about learning from the struggle, but can we also learn from the success?
Absolutely. We learn from everything. I mean, I think that is the story here. I mean, I think, you know, the idea that, you know, they say the greatest people in the world learn more from their failures than they do their success. But if you don't have success learning objectives as well, you don't get the whole picture. So I think both of them are super important. And obviously, when you do something right, you should keep doing it. But when you're doing something wrong, you got to stop and figure it out.
You know, we're landowners, so I'm always curious. You have so much land. I'm sure you're making a decision was more than impulse to donate your own land to create Boulder, Crest instead of working within existing institutions.
Well, you know, there was no existing privately kind of funded healthcare model. Now, I'm a disabled vet. I get healthcare at the VA, which I find to be very good. But I've also, as an executive, I've also had healthcare at the Mayo Clinic, and it's really good. And And that's what I wanted to build. I wanted to build a Mayo Clinic for veterans who couldn't get that access because of the financial issues that were.
What is it like having it in so close proximity to your home?
Well, we have 200 acres. It's not that close.
Yeah, I get that. I get
and
that.
it's a wooded mountain between the house and the retreat. So
Only advantages.
advantages. I never see a disadvantage. It's the most heartwarming thing I've done. And by the way, you know, we have another place in Arizona. We have a place in Texas. And right before the new year, we had an 87-year-old Navy veteran donate a 200-acre ranch to us in Wyoming.
By your example.
By our example.
By your example. We'll be back with some final thoughts here. I'm Armstrong Williams with our guest, Ken Falke.
As a home buyer, you need a lender who cares about your home ownership dreams. United Security Financial has been helping families secure their dream homes for 30 years. We're a national fair practice lender that provides affordable mortgages and low down payment programs to eligible home buyers. To learn how United Security Financial can help you secure your dream home, call 1-800-373-4186.
You know, veterans are really neglected in our country. They don't always get the best benefits. So many of them are homeless. On the scale of what you're doing, is deep down never enough, is it?
It's never enough. You know, my good friend Gary Sinise, who has a big foundation and a lot of visibility in this community, always says, you know, we can never do too much, but we can always do a little bit more.
But how do we do more and duplicate not only what you're doing, but more of that across the country?
Yeah, you know, Armstrong, it's a great question because I think there is a lot going on. When I think back, you know, I grew up here in D.C. during the Vietnam War, and a lot of my friends' dads were fighting in Vietnam and coming home, and I saw the way they were treated. This generation hasn't had that problem. This generation's been treated very, very well. There's about 45,000 charities that support veterans, and a lot of those post 9/11 only, and I think we've done a great job.
How does someone, because I'm running out of time, is there a website?
Yeah, bouldercrest.org.
Bouldercrest.org.
That's right, bouldercrest.org, and you can learn as much as you want and get in touch with us, and we're here to help.
You know, veterans are so sacred. The sacrifices that they've made for us, they have the freedom that we have today. These younger generation can't even begin to understand what that sacrifice and what that civic duty is really about. I know my brother, Hunter Morin, has been trying to get us together for ages. Now I understand why. We just cannot thank you enough for what you do and how you serve, not by rhetoric, but by example. I wish others would follow that example. And thank you so much for joining us for this edition of the Armstrong Williams Show.